More Than Rich podcast. Today we are here with Kirk Beck, a retired captain from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and an experienced educator in both mathematics and civics. Kirk has spent over 40 years in public service, from defending constitutional rights with the power of affidavits to founding the Alpha Center for Women, supporting women in crisis pregnancies. Join us as we dive into the fascinating journey, exploring what motivates him, the stories that have shaped his life, and his passion for liberty and education. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joseph, for having me on your show.
Yeah, you have a super unique background. Military discipline, education, passion, and legal advocacy. How does that all come into one person? I would love to know your interest in Army Corps of Engineers, first of all.
Curiosity. I'm a person who asks questions. Willing to step outside of the comfort zone into what I call the reality outside the box. Most people are just looking for a contentment in life. I'm not opposed to that, of course. I'd rather be content, but when I see things that are not as they should be, as they once were, I want to know what can I do about that? Am I just to coast along, or do I want to try and figure out what the truth is? And I've been moderately successful in finding the truth. That doesn't always make you rich, but I'm rich in experiences. I'm rich in quality relationships with people, and that's what. Well, as a wise man told me a long time ago, the only thing you can take to heaven with you is your friends and your family. So why not invest in those things that really matter? I was born in South Dakota 75 years ago. I was trained at South Dakota Tech and got a degree in engineering. I look back and I think, wow, I went through college and I never worked full time while I was in college. I did work in the summer, and I had an ROTC scholarship, and I walked away 4 years later and I didn't owe anybody anything. I think about what life is like today for people going to college. It's an immense difference in 40 years, one generation. So I went to work for Shell Oil Company. Well, first of all, I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, in the Corps of Engineers. Now, the Corps of Engineers at that time, this was early 70s, we were going through something called the Vietnamization of the war in Vietnam, in which the Vietnamese were taking it over and the Americans were coming home. So coming out of the college in 1972, I was put into the reserves right away. Unfortunately, I never had the experience of seeing war itself. I was stateside the whole time. Eventually moved to Colorado, and it was in Colorado that I got married, and I began my life basically as an educator. In Colorado, I had an unusual experience one time. I was just traveling home, 2:00 in the morning with my wife, and a police officer stopped me, and he gave me a ticket for a rolling stop. My goodness sakes, at 2:00 in the morning, this is a neighborhood where there's hardly any traffic in the daytime. Now where were you hiding? But he was getting his quota, I think, and I stumbled into his trap. And so I paid the fine, but it made me just start to think, what's going on here? Why was I ticketed and there was no victim at all, and I'm paying $100 and some to whom? Oh, the government is ticketing me and the government is getting the money. That sounded like a conflict of interest to me. I subsequently moved to California, where I've been for 37 years. And I admit, every time I do a podcast, I admit publicly that I'm a recidivist when it comes to rolling stops. I just can't stop not stopping. So I've gotten like 3 or 4 of these out here. And every time I went to court, I always asserted my rights to travel. It seemed like, for goodness sakes, I'm not bothering anybody. I'm looking 50 yards down that way and 50 yards down that way. I don't see anybody anywhere around, including an officer hiding someplace. So I'd get another ticket and I would go to court and I would fuss about it, and then I'd pay the fine. Well, one time I got so irritated that I said, I'm not paying the fine. Well, that's a stupid thing, not really, because unless you've got some kind of a plan, you're eventually going to have a problem. So I got another rolling stop. I come to a very close to stop, but not total. And then being out here in California for 36 years, I've only gotten like 4 or 5 of these, so it's not like I do it constantly. But nevertheless, I'm in court again. This time it's a misdemeanor because I'm driving on a suspended license.
Ooh.
Well, at some point in the trial, I made an objection to what the district attorney said, and the judge said, "You're going to have to explain that." So I started to explain it, and he said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, stop right there." Now, Joseph, I tell people I practice law by doing law. I went to court asserting my right to travel, and the judge said this to me, "Mr. Beck, you bring up some very valid points. Nevertheless, that's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up by way of a pre-trial motion." Now, I lost, but I won. This judge gave me a nugget of great information, which I've used to my advantage since. Sometime after this, I found myself in court again, this time as part of a jury pool. A man was representing himself for 17 felonies. He's representing himself for 17 felonies. He makes a statement and the judge cuts him off and said, "Sir, you had an opportunity to have an attorney. You chose not to have an attorney. You're going to have to play by all the rules." And I'm sitting right behind the defendant, and he's shaking his head vigorously. He didn't open his mouth, but he was telling the courtroom, "I don't agree with that judge is saying." 2 days later, I got on in the jury, and the judge was going through his caveats with us. And when he got done, he said, "Mr. 14, that was me, he said, I can see by your body language that you're not agreeing with some of the things I'm saying." And I said, "That's true." He said, "Well, explain it." So I did. And about 5 minutes later, he said, "I think we'll take a recess." When we came back from the recess, he said, "Number 14, you're free to go." And I left. But I did something no other juror who's been dismissed does. I came back the next day and sat right behind the defendant because I wanted to learn what was going on there. And I found out that what I assumed was true was in fact reality, that he had gone out with an attorney to discuss the attorney's role as a counselor, not taking over the case. And when he came back, the attorney stood up, addressed the judge, and said, "Your Honor, based upon my time with the defendant, I would recommend a full psychiatric evaluation." The defendant had no clue that that was going to be said. So I learned a little bit from that, but then he told me something that changed my life. He told me about Jack and Margie Flynn, who are trying to help him several states away to defend himself. And I developed my relationship with Jack and Margie Flynn. Joseph, at the end of this interview, I have a gift that I want to give any of the listeners. So I'm going to be talking about that at the end. But the gift is what they basically gave me, the Flynn. And I began to use this process called what I call the power of paper, the affidavit process, to force government to obey the Constitution of the United States. Why, as an educator, I never learned this in all my years of going to high school, 2 degrees from college, engineering and math education. I never got any of this. This is critically important for Americans to understand how to control government. If you can't control government, government's going to end up controlling you. And that's not the way the country was set up. We now see in the United States that we have all these very super rich people. We have billionaires in this country. And yet at the other end, we've got a tremendous number of people that are on the street that own nothing. I often tell people what we're playing in America today is the sinister game of musical chairs, where they turn the music on, they turn it off, and another bunch of people are homeless, while there's other people who are becoming mega rich. Now, this is taking place because we, the people, have been replaced by they, the elected. These government officials are not our leaders. These government officials are supposed to be public servants who basically serve for next to nothing in order to bring about a better society. That's
And
not what we have anymore.
Can I piggyback off that beginning of philosophers? They too thought that those positions held in society should be for free, right? Like, I think it was was it the tax collector that worked for free in the society? But I'm talking like early Plato, like those government roles, I believe. Yeah. Those government roles, I believe, were you wanted to serve the community. Like there wasn't any financial real incentives in those positions originally when they were created.
Especially among the Greeks.
Yep.
The Greeks saw that, and the Roman, not the empire, but the Roman Republic. There was this attitude of sacrifice. And we don't have much of that anymore. Although I like to bring out in the state of New Hampshire, I'm in California, my assemblywoman gets paid $100,000 a year, and it's a full-time job. In New Hampshire, they have citizens who are there for 2 or 3 months at the most, and they get paid $100 per session. $100. They don't want to be there all year long. They don't want to pass 1,500 laws. They simply want to do what's necessary for the state, and then they go back to their business. That's a better model than what we've got out here.
Interesting. I would like to go back a little bit more. Like, what does early Kirk look like? I know we jumped straight to your life and, how it got so chaotic all at once, but what was early childhood like? Do you have early memories and how that might have influenced you in your path?
Oh, yes. One of the most outstanding things that I remember was going to my elementary school, kindergarten, all the way through 6th grade. And at 11:30 every morning, the bell rang. We all went, and if it was South Dakota, it could be winter, we put on our overshoes and we walked home because our moms were all at home. And we ate our dinner with our moms usually, and then by 12:30 we had to be back in school. Now imagine that today. First of all, you wouldn't allow your child to walk home alone. Well, in those days, everybody's walking home alone, and your mom was there. I knew no one other than one young man who had a divorce. Everybody else, their families were intact. They weren't perfect, of course, but there was little or no divorce in South Dakota in 1950s and 60s. So that's the thing that I remember most. Everybody had a home. We could play throughout the summer. We go to somebody else's house because somebody else's mom was home. And I went back to my hometown not long ago and I realized that they tore the school down.
Oh, wow.
Why did they tear the school down? Oh, one of the reasons why they tore the school down is because that school didn't have any place to cook meals. If the kids aren't going home anymore because moms aren't home at noon, they're out working, you have to feed the kids at school. They had to build a brand new school with a place where they could serve hot lunches.
Wow.
That may
That's
not have been the
crazy.
only reason. That school was, of course, kind of old, but I think it was one of the main reasons why they had to either do a major rehab on the building or just tear it down and build a new one because the
Is
parents
there
weren't home anymore.
is there a specific part of your career in the Army Corps that you feel like you're most proud of?
Mm-hmm. No, I have to be honest. There's nothing that I'm proud of when I was there. Um, it was a good learning experience for me. I remember driving onto the Fort Belvoir uh, fort complex and noticing all these two-story brick frame buildings. And not once, but at least 4 or 5 times, I heard this. All those buildings have majors and captains and maybe a few colonels, and they're all waiting for the next war because that's the only way they'll be promoted.
Wow.
Wow, I thought, my
Wow.
gosh, I mean, I don't want to be promoted. I don't like war. I can't imagine anybody looking forward to the next one. But there certainly was that attitude that if you're going to stay in the Army and you want to move up, I mean, I came in as a second lieutenant. I did absolutely nothing, but as time went by, I became a first lieutenant. As time went by, I became a captain. I was a captain in the Army, and we played war a little bit. I had to learn how in the Corps of Engineers, we either build bridges or we blow them up. So
Wow.
we had to learn how to blow up bridges. We didn't blow any up, but we practiced blowing them up. And that was my tour of duty for 6 months. I was active duty for 6 months, released into the reserves for the next 8 years. That was my experience with the Army.
What was transitioning like from military to teaching?
Oh, it was seamless. It was very easy. I was never in the Army full time other than those 6 months, and I came back. I got involved in a political campaign in 1972. From 1972 to 1974, 75, I worked for Shell Oil Company in Denver, Colorado. And when I got married, I went back to college. I was going to get a master's degree in engineering, and I was getting tired. I knew deep down I wanted to be with people, not with things. So I ended up changing course and becoming a math teacher, in which that's what I've basically done ever since, teaching mathematics. And
Yeah, I was
sometimes I got the chance to teach civics.
my next question was the challenges you face teaching civics and math in public versus private schools. Is there like a big difference?
Private schools. I actually ran a private school for six years in Colorado before I came to California, and night and day opportunities because in private
Wow.
schools and not the rigorous regulations and rules, we could do things that public schools could never consider doing. I'll give you a great example. I had a young boy. His name was Doug. He was in the school, and he's seventh, eighth grade kid, and he was just what I call a passive rebel. He was polite. He never got in any trouble, but he's wasting time constantly. I would go around and I'd say, "What are you doing? Give me that. That's a Rubik's Cube. You're not supposed to be doing that now." Blah, 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 blah. And we went around and around and around on this. Well, finally, I said to the pastor, I said, we have to disenroll this kid because it's like thievery. He's not doing anything in school. Pastor brought the mother in. The mother started crying her eyes out and said, "I want him to stay in the school." So the pastor came back and said, "We've got to keep him." I said, okay, I've been thinking about it. Here's my alternative. He goes home with me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And the only rule I apply is if you don't get your work done, you don't get to eat. And the pastor said, "Well, that's a novel approach. I'll go back to the mother." And the mother agreed to it.
Oh, wow.
So Doug went home with me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And the first Monday, I didn't say anything to Doug all day long. But when it was lunchtime, I said, "Doug, do you have your work done?" "No." "Well, you can stay right in here and play with your Rubik's Cubes and your magic trick." He was happy with that. 5 o'clock, he goes home with me. He hasn't eaten all day. My family sits down to eat. And "Doug, do you have your work done?" "No." "Well, you can't eat yet." "Oh, that's okay. I'm not hungry." Okay, so at 9 o'clock, I go in and check on Doug. "Doug, you haven't eaten yet. Do you have your work done?" "No." "Well, we're going to bed." I'm okay. I'm going to bed too. 6 o'clock in the morning, I got up, sitting at the table. Doug comes out and he goes right to the refrigerator. I said, "Doug, is your work done?" "No." "Well, you know what the rule is." "Yeah, I know, but I'm hungry." "I know you're hungry. I'm surprised you're not starving. Now, you have to get your work done." And by 9 o'clock that morning, he had all of his work done. And I sent him to the cafeteria and he ate. And for the next 7 weeks, Doug went home with me every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we never had any problem. And Doug always got his work done. Now, you can't do that in public schools. Matter of fact, in
What do you
most private schools, you can't even do it. But we did it.
what do you think was that catalyst there of connecting, and what do you think the mom was doing wrong?
Well, mothers have a tendency to be too passive, too accommodating to weaknesses. Men are often the more firm person. In this case, the father was pretty much absent, working all the time. So it was left to mom to put the rules in place, and she didn't have any rules. She didn't know how to really. She was blessed in the sense that she didn't have um, a mean-spirited son. He was a
Mm.
very accommodating young guy, but he just didn't want to do his work. So when we applied the biblical principle that says, "If a man will not work, neither shall he eat," and then the proverb that says, "A man's hunger, an appetite works for his hunger urges him on," we applied those things and we had a remedy to the situation.
I love how you reference that because I want to know your thoughts on universal truths, right? Like the Bible holds a lot of those, whether you believe in it or not. There's definitely a lot that you can gain from it. Do you not agree?
I absolutely agree. Um, if the author of the Bible was God, you would think he would probably cover everything. He set us in motion down here and he didn't walk away. He left us with a Bible. He left us with wisdom by which we can either reject or accept. The more that we accept it, the better off we're going to be. As a culture, in years past, we had our blind spots. We certainly were a nation that accepted slavery. We didn't treat the indigenous native populations the proper way, but we did a lot of things right also. And in some respects, we're repenting for the things we've done in the past. But one thing that characterized the American people is that they did look to the Bible for wisdom. They might have been blinded to some things because of their bigotry and their bias, but they still were nevertheless largely guided by the Bible. And the Bible gave a lot of truth and direction to a country, and we profited as a nation primarily because of our willingness to follow biblical ideas.
What inspired your idea or the start of Alpha Center for Women?
Well, I got involved with the Right to Life organization. And the one time I was there one evening with 9 women, and I was the only guy. And I wasn't the president. I was just kind of learning. And they're talking about how to raise $50, and then they spend the rest of the time talking about how we're going to spend $50. And eventually, I mean, they elected me president. I said, we're not going to talk doing that anymore. We're going to save a baby. Maybe we'll only save one baby, but we're going to save a baby. Now, I was at that time also the president of something called Citizens for Decency Through Law. I was adamantly opposed to pornography, and I was out in front of a pornographic facility, and somebody came up to me and said, I heard you're from South Dakota. And I said, yes. He said, have you ever heard of this couple in Sioux Falls that are saving babies? I said, no. Tell me. And I got to know these people. They had started an Alpha Center for Women in Sioux Falls, and they actually came to Fort Collins, Colorado, and helped me start an Alpha Center for Women in Fort Collins, which is still in existence 40 years later. And
Wow.
we started on a shoestring budget, and we thought we got enough churches behind us to allow us to rent a facility. We did something very unique at the time. What we did is we just simply went to we got some recordings, 3-minute recordings, and we had them played by a professional answering service. So we put an ad in the newspaper, we put ad in the yellow pages, and people would find the ad that said abortion information, and they would look at these 6 different audios that they could listen. They would make a phone call, and the professional service would say, yes, I want to listen to number 3. And they would play it, and at the end it would say, if you have any questions, please call this number. That number went into my house. We didn't have an office. It just went into my house. And usually I would turn the phone over to my wife. And my wife would talk to the young girl about the situation. And we would arrange an opportunity to get together and talk.
Oh my gosh.
And we were saving babies.
Yo, that's one
Maybe
person at a time. What is that like? How do you feel? Like, was your phone ringing off the hook? Did you realize the problem was worse than you thought? What's the process like?
fortunately it didn't ring off the hook at the beginning. At the beginning, it was just one young lady who was in Nebraska, and she drove all the way with her boyfriend, all the way to Fort Collins. And I was nervous because we didn't have a lot of resources. So we were going to do the best we could. And fortunately, what happened that first one was my wife took the young lady into a room, and I took the young man into another room. And through discussion, we found out that they both had the same attitude. They wanted to save the baby, but they didn't want to force the other person to do something. So I got together with my wife and we said, my goodness, they're on the same page. They want to save the baby. Let's bring them together and let them know. They drove 180 miles to find out that they both wanted to keep the baby.
Wow.
That little kid is 40 some years old now. But the amazing thing is that was the one that God gave us first. And it was such an eye-opening experience for my wife and myself that we decided, we think God is really in this. Let's just keep doing it. And we just started telling people what we were doing. Next thing we had to do, we had to bring in more counselors. And that was beautiful because,
Yeah.
hey, I'm dealing with Mormons, Roman Catholics, Protestants, evangelicals, and we're not arguing about religion. We're just talking about how to save babies. And we were very effective. The first year that we were there, we probably saved a dozen babies. That's one a
Wow.
month. That's pretty darn good. We did that for
Does
2.5 years. And when we left, we had a nice facility, very modest facility, and we were dealing with 10 to 15 women a month.
Oh, wow. How does the religions come into play? Like, does it actually help having different religions, like maybe cater to the person's needs that might believe in that specific ideology? Is that where that comes from?
Well, one thing was helpful was that we were able to get support from a lot of different places. The
Mm,
Mormons helped. The Roman Catholics helped us. The evangelicals and the mainline Protestants were all giving us $50 a month, $100 a month. And that allowed us to buy the things that we needed to do. We had a clothing closet for the girls. We were able to give them support after. We even had one young lady and ended up living with my wife and me. She just came to live with us until she had her baby. And we had other families that took the girls in, so they didn't have to worry about accommodations for several months until the baby was born. We did the best we could, and what they're doing right now back in Fort Collins is staggering compared to what we were doing.
Did you have any pushback at all?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Well, we were never vandalized, but people were speaking out in the newspaper about what we're doing. They were, oh, it's so appropriate now because of what you hear, disinformation, misinformation. You hear about that on the internet all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't have the internet back then, but we had newspapers, and people were writing articles about what we were doing,
Oh,
and
wow.
they didn't like it.
You made it. You made it.
You got to remember, this was Roe v. Wade was 1972.
Oh, wow.
We're doing this in 77, 78. It still wasn't the mindset that we have now,
Yeah.
where they're very adamant, like almost violent in support
Mm-hmm.
of abortion. So you have a lot of pro-life facilities that are vandalized. Um, we didn't have that problem. They knew where we were, but we never had eggs on our doorstep or anything like that. Mostly it was just people writing in the newspaper about it. It wasn't very serious at all. What people go through today is much, much more serious.
How did the partnership with Jack and Margie Flynn come about?
Uh, I met them by way of that court case. I got on the phone and started talking to them. I studied their materials and I started to use the process. And the first thing that happened was I got another rolling stock. So I decided, well, I'm going to try Jack and Margie Flynn. So the first thing I did is I wrote a letter to the deputy who arrested me. That's kind of interesting. If you talk to a group of people and you say, how many of you have ever been arrested? And very few hands will go up. Now I'd say, well, how many of you have been stopped by a police officer because you did something wrong in your car? And everybody's hand goes. Well, let me inform you, you've all been arrested. There's not one person in here doesn't have an arrest on their crime sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I used the technique of writing them a letter, and I knew they wouldn't answer that. But then I wrote them an affidavit. Now, an affidavit is simply a statement of facts sworn to under penalty of perjury. So I sent that to the deputy. Now, my affidavit, crafted by the Flynns, has a very important initial paragraph and a very important final paragraph. In the first paragraph, we point out to them, you have a lawful responsibility to answer this affidavit. You can't treat it like a letter and just throw it away. The final paragraph goes a little farther and says, you have 30 days in order to rebut the affidavit. Otherwise, everything in it can be used against you in a court of law, in any court of law in America. I don't send an affidavit to anybody but the person responsible for the action. In this case, it was just a deputy. Well, he probably threw my letter away, even though he had to sign for my letter. Everything I send goes by certified mail. So he signed for the letter, probably showed it to some of his buddies, and never thought anything more about it. But when the affidavit came, I know he got concerned, because the points of law that I put in my affidavit can't be rebutted. It's the law. I'm sorry that you guys weren't taught the law, but here it is. So he gave that to the legal department. The legal department probably said something like, look, we got a lot bigger fish to catch. Just let him go. Don't worry about him. Because the legal guy who's getting paid $250,000, he can't rebut the affidavit either. You don't put anything into an affidavit that's not constitutional, based upon solid evidence, facts, and the truth. Don't lie in an affidavit. It can get you in trouble. Unless you're worth millions of dollars, then you probably can get away with it. But for little guys, don't lie in affidavit. So I went to the traffic court, and I walked in, and there came the deputy, and he gave something to the bailiff. The bailiff gave it to the judge, and 2 minutes later, the judge saying, Mr. Beck, are you here? Mr. Beck, your case has been dropped. You can leave.
Oh, wow.
Now, I want to back up. Whenever I go to court, I always take a witness with me. I always ask for the minute order. I want whatever the clerk is putting down pertinent to my case. I want that before I leave. Oh, I left. I just won a case that would have cost me $240 had I lost. It cost me a day in court, which isn't cheap for some people. I'm retired. It doesn't cost me anything. And then I had to put out certified mailings twice. Now, my attitude was, I didn't like what was going on here. I think I'll sue this guy in small claims court. Margie and Jack said, don't do that. I want you to write him a nice thank you letter that he finally did what he should have done to begin. So I did it. When I win, I will write a thank you letter to the government official because I'm trying to get them to understand we're not a menace to society. We're just simply people who have studied the law enough to know that certain things aren't right, and we're going to stand up for our right to, in this case, travel uninhibited as long as I obey the rules of the road. If I'm going too fast and I cause an accident, I better have insurance. If I'm tailgating somebody too close and they stop and I hit them, I better have insurance.
So just to kind of clarify, what was the facts that you stated that got you in or got the case dropped?
First
It
point.
doesn't have to be word for word, but
Okay, well,
just kind of.
the DMV code in California is this big. I don't know where
Yeah.
Joseph is. You're probably about the same size. Well, the interesting thing about this is that code is for commerce. Legal words have precise definition. I could go to the Code of Federal Regulations and I could show you what the word driver means according to law. Driver means someone involved in commerce. A motor vehicle is something that is used in commerce. When I got my rolling stop, was on my way to a meeting. I was not involved in commerce.
Oh my gosh.
So that's number
That's
one.
awesome. That's
The
awesome.
number two was we have a court case in California called Sava versus California, or California versus Sava. And it says since a traffic infraction is not a crime, you don't get a jury trial. Oh, they just told me that infraction is not a crime. Wait a minute. A police officer can only arrest you if he's serving a warrant, acting on a verifiable complaint made by an American citizen, or he observes you commit a crime. Infractions, by legal definition, is not a crime. So imagine you're a deputy sheriff and you get this. In fact, deputy, you committed a false arrest.
Oh man.
And everything in my affidavit must be rebutted, otherwise it can be used against you in a court of law. No wonder he didn't want this to go anywhere. Who is this guy? Am I actually going to have to go to court and defend myself against a false arrest? I don't know why I won. And the opposition will never tell you why you won. You just win.
Yep.
And I live by several mottos. Here's one of them. What would the world be like if everybody's doing what I'm doing? Gosh, what would the world be like if 1/10 of
You
1% of the
mean
people are doing what I'm doing?
you mean if people held others accountable?
Others accountable, but most emphatically, government. Government is an encroaching menace. I often tell people, when you're just talking to me, I hope, to the best of my ability, you are hearing the words of Jesus and the words of Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is my great hero. And it was Jefferson who said, the government that governs the least governs the best. We are supposed to govern each other and ourselves, most definitely. So we don't have to have government telling us how to tie our shoe. And they eventually will. They will continue to grow and want to control because the wrong kind of people are going to go into government 80% of the time. You're going to get your 20% that go in for the right reason. But the majority of the people going into government, for elected offices anyway, are going in there in order to increase their power, prestige, and their wealth.
I would also argue that being around that corruption, that 20% is often influenced to cave or get out in that sense.
Absolutely true. Bad company corrupts good morals. When you go into Washington, D.C., You are beginning to be groomed. And I don't know if you remember Ron Paul?
Oh my gosh.
He
Yeah,
was
he's
the
the one that he woke my eyes up when I was 15. I was
all right.
like, "Oh, this guy's speaking truth to power and everyone's calling him a radical."
Yeah. Ron Paul was the one guy who went in and said, stick it. I know who I am, and you're never going to be able to get me to compromise. Joseph, the greatest story about Ron Paul is that Mother Teresa came to Congress and addressed Congress, and when it was done, they voted to give her a medallion and some other awards, and the vote was, I don't know, 400 and something to 1. One person voted against Mother Teresa? Yep, Ron Paul. So the journalists get to Ron Paul and said, how can you vote against Mother Teresa? And he said, well, I took an oath to the Constitution. I don't have the right to take the people's money and give it to even somebody as noble as Mother Teresa. But I'll tell you
Wow.
what I will do. He took out his checkbook and he wrote a check for the amount of money that was going to come out of the United States Treasury to pay for the medallion and the award. He reimbursed the United States Treasury dollar for dollar because he was a man who lived by principle. And we actually had a chance in 2012 to elect a man of
Elect him.
principles. And the
Yeah.
Republican Party stuck a knife in his back and treated him as a nut. Yeah, he was a nut, all right. He was a nut enough to believe that one man could stand against all the power and not be moved. And he proved it could be done.
And imagine though, like I'm saying, me as a 15-year-old, I'm literally looking around the room like, are y'all not hearing this guy? Like, why? What is going on? Why am I crazy for thinking he's speaking truth and no one's believing me? Like adults, my own parents are like literally using the words radical. It would
Yeah,
never happen. So it's like this perception. It's not just their view, right? They know how he's perceived to everybody else.
Joseph, I have a chance to teach civics in the summer. I bring these 60 kids in there, and I've got them for 3 weeks for 4 hours every day. Early on, I tell them, I am going to show you a movie, and I want you guys to give it 20 minutes because it was made in 1939, and you're going to think it's a little hokey at the beginning, but just hang on. And I showed over the course 140 teenagers, 17 years old. I showed them Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Joseph, you ever seen that movie?
No, I haven't.
All right, Jimmy Stewart stars in it, and he's like Ron Paul. And when you get done, the last 5 minutes, he is trying to filibuster all by himself. And the powers of evil come down on him. And he gives a magnificent oration. And the amazing thing is, when it's done, I said to my students on the daily quiz, I want you to rate the movie 0 to 10. 10 being the best movie you've ever seen. 140 teenagers rated the movie predominant number 9, nothing less than 8, and a handful of 10. This is a generation that's seen all these high-tech movies.
Just to go over a little bit, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is about an idealistic and inexperienced man, Jefferson Smith, who is appointed to the U.S. Senate. Once in Washington, he discovers widespread political corruption and faces immense pressure from a corrupt political machine. Despite being expected to be a mere pawn, Smith stands up for justice and democracy, culminating in a dramatic filibuster to expose the truth and fight for the values he believes in. highlights themes of integrity, political corruption, and the power of one person to make a difference. Interesting.
Oh, I'm so glad you read that because I left out some important points. Mr. Smith goes to
Go for it.
Washington. But to me, I say, you want to dump, criticize young people? All I know is when young people see somebody who stands up for the truth, they are more easily convinced to sacrifice for it than anybody over the age of 40. 40-year-olds, they have to think about what they're going to lose. 16, 18, 20-year-old, not so much. And I love working with young people. They're so much easier to educate.
The most famous moment in the film is a lengthy filibuster where he holds the Senate floor for hours in a passionate plea for honesty, justice, and the American way. So I'm kind of getting an image of it, right? Like some super good speech that's like probably captivating in the film.
My sons are involved in theater, and I have my test of my 3 E's. Is it entertaining? Is it educational? Is it elevating to the soul of man? Mr. Smith Goes to Washington gets a 10, 10, 10. In the area of education, you will understand how the Senate rules work. He finds out how he makes mistakes, and his ally, his secretary, knows all the ins and outs of what's going on, and she tells him what to do and how to maneuver. And you learn a lot about the Senate by watching the movie.
How do you explain the power of affidavits to someone unfamiliar with the process?
Most of the time, you have to begin to explain to people what is an affidavit. Most people don't have much of an idea. I often begin by saying, can you name the 5 rights protected by the First Amendment? I've found only, I think, 2 or 3 people in my entire life who could give all 5. You got press, you got petition, you got assembly, you got religion, you got speech. Well, the one that's overlooked most of the time is petition. Americans don't understand that the petition for redress or remedy of grievances is the only offensive thing in the Bill of Rights, the only weapon you can actually use to force government to do something. They have to answer. As I say, you wanted the job as a legislator, you wanted the job as a law enforcement agent, you wanted the job as a judge. Well, part of your job is to answer an affidavit. Don't tell me to go talk to an attorney who's going to charge me $200 an hour. You're the public servant. It's part of your job description. You've got to answer this. And I'm giving you a whole 30 days to do it. And that's pretty much it. It's just something you've got to lay out what the situation is. Look, I've got 5 victories. So let me go through them kind of quickly so that you'll see what the body is. You already explained the traffic situation. Now, the next one was, I went to my assemblywoman and my senator, my state senator, and I took Shelley with me. I took Jason with me, and I asked both elected representatives, according to the Declaration of Independence, what is the purpose of government? Now, Joseph, if you want to have fun with elected officials, you can ask them this question because they're going to squirm, and then they're going to come up with something like, well, to protect the people. That's not the answer. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Everybody knows those words. Here's the next sentence. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's it. Assemblywoman, state senator, your job is to go up to Sacramento and pass laws that are constitutional that protect my rights. Don't go up there and try and protect me personally. I'll take care of that myself. If somebody comes into my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll take care of him myself. I won't call you up or the police because it'll be too late. I'm going to take care of that problem myself. Well, both of them flunked. They couldn't even tell me why they're up in what their job description is. 6 months later, she's trying to pass a statute that would put my pastor in jail as a felon.
Wow.
For doing what? For counseling someone who has perhaps suffering from sexual dysphoria. Couldn't quite know what gender they are. My pastor would give biblical counsel. She wants to make that a felony. Well, we sent her an affidavit spelling out exactly something called the right to free speech.
Oh
My
my gosh.
pastor has a right to free speech. He can't force somebody into his room to talk, but if they voluntarily come in there, you can't possibly think that this is going to be constitutional.
Nor could he force them to do anything either,
Right.
He's just giving advice. Yeah.
Exactly. So we sent her an affidavit, and others did letters. I did affidavits. Other people followed me and did affidavits. And the statute had passed the Assembly, had passed the Senate. Our governor was ready to sign it into law, and they mysteriously pulled the bill. They just pulled it. Now, the reason why I consider this a victory was what happened 6 months after that. The Assembly in California chose not to try and pass a statute, but they passed a resolution saying that pastors shouldn't do this. Well, my Assemblywoman had sponsored the statute. She didn't even sponsor the resolution because she knew we were watching her. And we'd already warned her. And now she's taking a similar action. She stopped. She didn't even, and she hasn't sponsored any such bill since. So I consider that a victory.
So just, shedding light or knowing that somebody's watching could be enough to deter somebody. You don't even have to be a powerful anyone with a lot of resources or money or a team of anybody. I think that's a good point to make there.
That's point one, but point two, it's an affidavit. An affidavit is much more powerful than a letter. Those words at the end are telling, can be used against you in any court in America.
And it's one of those things where they would just rather avoid it because they know some
Exactly.
legal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a group in Massachusetts that's doing the same thing. And they were ecstatic because the chief member of the Democratic Party in Massachusetts had gone public and saying, this was one of our least productive sessions of the legislature in my memory. Well, from his point of view, it was least productive. From our point of view, it was extremely successful because you didn't pass 400 statutes that aren't constitutional. We pushed back, and you decided not to fight.
You know what I find interesting is you're talking about how this is the only offense that we have, but it seems like we're so unaware that we only use it to defend ourselves, if at all.
That's true. I have used it 5 times successfully. 3 of those would be offensive. 2 of them would be defensive.
Interesting.
Best Buy told me I had to wear a mask to come into their store. I said, well, that's not right. You said, well, that's a law. No. Stop. It's the governor acting like he's the legislature. It's the governor telling you things to do you don't have to do. It's up to you to choose. Now, I always like to tell people this because they think California is totally wacko. We have 58 counties. Over 40 of those counties have sheriffs that think our governor is crazy. My sheriff is a Christian. My DA is a Christian. And both of them think the governor is crazy. So when the governor our governor actually went so far as to say, because of COVID, we don't want people singing songs in churches. Now our sheriff knows that the governor's crazy. But he went around, he said, I'm not enforcing those mandates. They're not laws. The legislature passes laws. The governor can say what he wants to say, but it's no force of law. So he told everybody, we're not going to enforce. So I went to Best Buy. They said I have to wear a mask. They said, I don't have to wear a mask. It's law. No, it's not a law. It's a mandate. Okay, so you're not going to let me in. Nope. So I put an affidavit together. Now, because it's a corporation, it's a little bit different. I have to find out where the corporation receives notices. So I had to get in my car and travel 50 miles to Glendale and serve the corporation at their service center. And that went to Minneapolis. And eventually, Best Buy had to come to small claims court. I only sue in small claims court because it's only $50. And they can't send an attorney. So they've sent a store manager to represent Best Buy. People say, well, did you win? Well, I was not here trying to get any money. I was trying to get them to stop abusing my right to go into their store. So even though the judge technically ruled against me, I got what I wanted because 2-3 months later, there weren't any masks in any store. Best Buy and everybody else folded. So in this case, somebody would say, well, you didn't really win. Well, gosh darn it, they had to show up. Now, what if everybody was doing what I'm doing? You think Best Buy would say, knock it off, no more masks, because we can't keep sending the store manager down there.
Is that one of those things where it was the judge's interpretation of the law?
Oh, absolutely. See,
that's so annoying.
The small claims court judge had never, ever heard what I was bringing forth. Now,
yep.
Going to court is a chess game. What did I learn? I learned the pretrial motion. I sent it in. They didn't act on it until the morning of the hearing, and I got an email saying your motion has been rejected. Oh. So now I'm lost. I have to go into the courtroom and start explaining the law to the judge. She never even saw my my motion. They just simply, this is small claims court. You don't get because you don't force the court to do it. So what I learned is if I do this again, I will file for pretrial motion. And a week before, they still haven't acted on my motion. So I'm going to go to court and I'm going to show up and I'm going to stand in front of the judge and I'm here on special appearance. My motion has not been heard, and I want to make sure that you rule on it before we have our actual hearing next week. You learn by doing. You also learn by being respectful to the court and never pushing your agenda. Never make a judge look stupid in front of a whole bunch of people. So you've got to do pretrial motion where it's just going to be you and the judge and the clerk and the bailiff. Maybe the other side will show up. Maybe they won't. And the judge can talk to you like you're out for coffee almost. And eventually you'll get what you want. Dismissal. I want this thing dismissed in my favor because they didn't even show up. any case, with the judge, what I did with her is I eventually sent her an affidavit, explained to her exactly what she did wrong in the court case, and I gave her 30 days to rebut. She didn't rebut, so now I just keep that on file with my green card. I have this green card that proves she got it. You have to get the green card on certified mail, save it. That's evidence that she got it. If she ever shows up in another court case where I'm involved, I will ask her to step down. I will tell her to step down because you've proven to be in violation of your oath. And since you're violating your oath, you're not fit to be a judge. At least in my case, everybody else might accept you, but I won't. And here's the evidence. I'm being respectful. I have found judges oftentimes are kind of like, wow, this is kind of interesting, because most of the time I come to court and it's just boring. This guy seems to know what he's talking about, and I might want to argue with him a little bit. Let's see how far he goes. And I enjoy spirited discussions with people who don't agree with me, because generally it always means I'm going to learn something. You're going to point something out to me. Take a note on that. I'm going to do some study on that later. And that's how I learn law.
I also like that you're not out here looking for problems, right? It seems like you're the one that's being attacked with everything. Like you're just defending yourself all the time, or hey, that's not just.
We had a chief medical officer. He's going around and telling all the restaurants they have to close during COVID. Well, the sheriff's not going to force them to close. But what he did is he came around and said, I'm going to start fining you $500 every day that you're open. Well, we found out that the law says before you can do any of this quarantining, social distancing, masking, closing people down, you have to follow the law. And the law says you have to have an independent review board set up that analyzes the data, and everybody on the independent review board can have absolutely no monetary interest in the outcome. Whoa.
That seems impossible.
You are violating the federal regulations. So we sent an affidavit to the chief medical officer, and he did absolutely nothing. Well, Margie and Jack told us, well, what you do next is you take that affidavit that you sent to him, you put it in an envelope with an affidavit to his boss, and his boss is the supervisor. We have 5 supervisors. All 5 of them got the same affidavit, and we got, remember, supervisor, you have 30 days to rebut this. Otherwise, everything in it can be used against you, and part of that is you are aiding and abetting somebody who is violating federal law.
Wow.
Well, the short story on it is that the guy ended up resigning, and he decided to move to Australia.
Oh, wow.
So we won. Now the supervisors are aware of the fact, hey, there's this organization out there that's sending these affidavits out. I never had one of my supervisors call me on the phone. He called me on the phone, and he was not happy. He was really not happy at all. And I said, well, just rebut the affidavit. Just rebut the affidavit. I haven't got anything else to tell you. Then he hung up. And since then, we've become more cordial towards each
other. That's funny. How has teaching others about defending their rights changed you personally?
Oh, it increases my frustration level.
Okay, that sounds like righteous indignation, where you get fired up from it, you know?
Now the people in Massachusetts, they backed off from the affidavits. They just do notifications. The reason why is I went to church one time and I just took the notification that we're working on for the Attorney General. And I said, look, just read this and sign it. Put it in an envelope and send it off. You don't have to do what I do. I do affidavits and they have a force of law. but at least you're doing something. So we've got the Attorney General getting these notifications, which we're pointing out he's doing something wrong. Affidavits would be better. And what I hope to happen through these interviews is that enough people get aware of what's going on. And I'm working with a man who's running for Congress. And the reason why I work with him, because he understands what I'm trying to do. And he said, if I win, I will start doing seminars in Riverside County highlighting what you're doing. Now imagine he's using his franking privilege to send out to every voter in Riverside County that we're going to have a seminar on affidavit process.
Wow.
You can see why I want this guy to win. Because the attention of the people in this county will go sky high when they understand what's going on. And we can control government in the county, and that's the purpose. I can't change Washington, D.C. if I can't change California. I can't change California if I can't change the county of Riverside and the city of Riverside and the school boards in Riverside and the water department in Riverside. It's all what's going on locally is what we have to center our attention on first and foremost.
Because then we use that as a proof of concept in other places to roll it out. But I think people don't get that part, you know?
That's right. They want to know, did you win? Yeah, I won. My biggest win was this one. In 2003, I went home to see my mom. While in Sioux Falls, I had another traffic issue. Again, no victim. No victim. Now I'm supposed to go to court. Wait a minute, I'm flying home. I'm not going to go to court over this. There's no victim. 10 years later, I go to get a gun. And they say, I can't give you a gun. You have a bench warrant in South Dakota. Well, for years, I went without a gun because I didn't know how to deal with it. But then I learned Jack and Martin Flynn. The bottom line is, Joseph, was there a victim? If there's no victim, then I shouldn't be in court. The country was initially run under common law jurisdiction. Thomas Jefferson wrote this in the Declaration. He, speaking of the king, has combined with others, speaking of Parliament and the governors, colonial governors, he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction that is foreign to our Constitution. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not the United States Constitution. The U.S. Constitution came 11 years after the Declaration of Independence. He has combined with others to subject us to a Constitution that is unacknowledged by our laws, and giving his assent to, here it comes, acts of pretended legislation. What Jefferson was saying was, they're trying to get us into a new jurisdiction where it doesn't have to follow common law. It can just tell you what you have to do. That's called positive law. Law is supposed to be negative. If I do something to Joseph that hurts Joseph personally, his property, or his reputation, then Joseph should be able to go to the court, go to government, and get remedy. If I don't do anything to Joseph or anybody else, why am I in court? And that's the point that I would always try to bring up in the future whenever somebody says I have to do something. No, the question is jurisdiction. And that's what we're going to deal with in a pretrial motion. We're going to deal with that jurisdiction issue there. That's where it needs to be dealt with.
Interesting.
So I'm I learned from Jack and Margie, so I put an affidavit together. I send it to the presiding judge in the county. He does nothing. I take his affidavit, put it into another envelope, and send it to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of South Dakota. And I spell out to him exactly what's going on here. And within 1 month, a bench warrant that's been on the record for 20 years or 15 years is gone. Is gone.
So, wouldn't you say like common law, like we talk about encroachment of government over all these years, right? The United States as a corporation is an idea of how it's all kind of been sold out to bigger corporations, how like reasons why we don't teach this, why judges may be in the pockets of corporations, things like that. I would imagine that there's all these relationships we don't know about within the court systems, whether it's judges that know attorneys or attorneys that know company, things like that in the system. What are your thoughts on just the
Well,
influence of corruption?
you just said the word corporation. Do you think the average American knows that their government is incorporated? No, they don't. And Jefferson spoke out strongly against corporation. He was like a prophet. I don't have the exact quote, but he was like a prophet. He was concerned that we would follow Europe and eventually have to deal with corporations. And that's what we've got in the country. I mean, just think about this business model for a minute. I'm going to commit fraud. I'm a pharmaceutical company, and I'm going to market a product, and I know it's ineffective and it might have some bad side effects, but I can make some money on this. And I make $7 billion in profit. And then I get sued and I have to pay damages of $500 million. I'll do this all day long. I'm saying we need to empty the jails of people who are caught smoking weed and put a bunch of white-collar criminals in there who are hiding behind corporations. They're committing acts, criminal acts, but they're simply saying, well, I'm incorporated. No, we have to amend the law so no matter what, if you're guilty of criminal action, you can't hide behind a corporation where you just pay money. No. You get 6 years in jail. We can
Makes
do that.
sense.
Right here in Riverside County, we had some guy we got rid of him, but then he got a job down in Orange County. And we actually contacted the FBI and gave them, look, he's doing the same thing in Orange County that he was doing up here. And the FBI investigated him, and the guy's got 6 years in Arizona penitentiary.
Wow.
This is a very small group of people who are having great effect because we just simply know a little bit of law. I know nothing about probate law. I don't want to learn about probate law. I don't want to know about family law. I want to learn
Getting
about
in
how to deal with government when they say I have to do something and there's no victim. No victim, no crime. No jurisdiction with the
a
government.
little transition here on parenting. How did you what made you write How to Parent the Passive Rebel?
Doug?
That's funny.
Well, I was working with a publishing company and they said, we want you to write a book. So I wrote a book because it was easy. I've only written 2 books. And Parenting the Passive Rebel, just my experience with Doug. And my experience with trying to do things the wrong way. Like I point out 5 things you never want to do in raising kids. So it's in the book. And it's really a booklet. It's very short. But it's very helpful to parents because they need to recognize, hey, the Bible's got answers.
How do you feel, or how do you view parenting today compared to when you first started teaching?
Well, unfortunately, the government become a bigger agent in the parenting process. I mean,
Especially in
a parent,
California.
especially California, can you imagine? Your kid can come to school out here, and he's a boy, but in class, he's a girl. And the teacher doesn't have, he may have 5 teachers. He may have one teacher who doesn't feel comfortable calling Johnny a she. He's either going to do that, the teacher's either going to do that, or the teacher's going to suffer some kind of reprimand.
Wow.
Well, what's happening here is the government saying, we know how best to handle Johnny. You parents don't know what you're doing. You're going to cause great strife for this kid. So we'll intercede in his behalf. And at our school, he can be Susan. So schools generally should build bridges to parents, not walls. And there are schools that are very good. They understand the importance of parents. And when I was teaching, I taught public schools 2 times, once for 2 years, then I went into private. And then near the end, the last 7 years, I went back into public schools. And we generally had a pretty good school. Every Tuesday night when I was in the public schools, I opened my classroom up from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and I invited the parents to come down. You can talk to me one-on-one. I'm going to be dealing with students that are in here. I'm going to be showing them how to do problems, and you can learn right along with them. Now, some schools would never allow you to do that, but my principal said that's a good idea. So we did it.
Yeah. Seems, I guess a good answer is like less knowing your teacher in that aspect or caring, right?
Well, when you have teachers that care, it's a great place. You have teachers that are there for the money, not such a nice place. Most
That is
teachers
so
are there
true.
because they care.
What inspired your upcoming book, Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue?
My son was 10, 11 years old, and I've always been against violence. So I just made up this Officer Hanson, and he would always use his physical strength. He never had to use a gun. And I made the stories up, and my wife would say, why don't you put that in a book? And I said, well, I think it's probably a little too impractical. And by providence, I ran into Dale Brown. Dale Brown is in Detroit. And Dale Brown runs a security company where he trains his security officers how to disarm violent situations so you don't have to disarm violent people. What really got me was his website had 7 testimonials from Detroit Police Department personnel. All of
Wow.
these cops had at least 15 to 25 years of experience, and all 7 of them said the same thing. Why were we not taught this way? Had we been taught this way, there would be less people dead and there'd be less lawsuits against Detroit PD. I got on an airplane, I flew to Detroit, I spent one day riding with Dale Brown, who's African American, and he taught me more about history, what blacks experienced. I didn't know about what happened in Tulsa back in the early 1900s. I didn't learn a lot when I went through school. And then I proposed certain scenarios to Dale, and he always seemed to come up with a third option other than killing the guy or letting him go. And the best one that he gave me, which I said, well, I forgot what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. Michael, somebody, I can't remember his name, but he was shot by a police officer. And I gave that scenario to him. What would you do, Dale, if a guy's coming at you with a knife? Because what officers are trained to do is to put him down. And you might use a taser, but a lot of cops will just pull out a gun and shoot him. And Dale said, well, would it matter who the person is that's coming to you? Now, what goes through when I do this with police officers, what usually comes to their mind is, well, maybe it's a woman or it's a minority. And most cops will say, no, it doesn't matter. And then you hit them with this. What if it's your own son? If it's your own son, would you make sure you put the bullet right there in the middle of his chest, making sure that he doesn't come after you? Or would you come up with another method of maybe disarming him without killing him? The Dale Brown Security Agency, everybody spends 1 hour every day practicing martial arts. The women as well as the men all are highly skilled in martial arts. What happens when you're skilled with martial arts is the fear factor goes way down.
Wow.
You know you don't have to shoot the guy because he's just coming at you with a knife, for crying out loud.
So I'm part of community police in Austin, and one of the things that I can definitely corroborate what you're saying is that women feel more confident joining the police force having had training before they jump into it, as opposed to like going into the police and just getting the start of an introduction of violence. If you're already pre-trained, like you're talking about martial arts, they do feel a sense of confidence with, how they're going to handle the situation. They're more prepared.
Yes. With that young man, the other one is this one. You're walking down the street and two people are mugging a woman. What would you do? Now, I actually had a police officer tell me, knowing what I know about the law, I would just keep walking. I said, what, you're going to keep walking? Yeah. Well, let me change the scenario.
He's like, I didn't see it.
That woman being mugged across the street is your mother. Now you're going to just keep walking? You see that mother over there and that young man that you were going to shoot, they represent the common law. Common law is you treat everybody the way you would want to be treated, and the world becomes a much, much better place. Cops can figure out ways to disarm that man without killing him. And that's what those 7 cops in Detroit said. Yeah. Why weren't we trained this way?
And just to reference Tulsa real quick, 1921 Tulsa race massacre devastated Greenwood, prosperous black community known as Black Wall Street. Yeah. Following an incident between a black man and a white woman, a white mob attack during burning homes, businesses, killing up to 300 black residents, leaving thousands homeless. It destroyed a thriving community largely ignored in history for decades. Apparently, it was millions of dollars worth of damages. There was a whole massacre, is what they describe it as. Yeah.
Now, that should be in our history book.
I'd never heard about it in detail like that. So, yeah.
As well as many noble stories of how white people defended black people. We just need to know the whole truth. Black people, Indians, Hispanics, Asians, white people, we're all the same. We're all human beings. And we do well when we treat each other out of love and respect, regardless of race or sex. And that's what we try to convey through our work.
What role do you think compassion should play in law enforcement?
Very high. Very high. My book, Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue, there's 57 chapters. Almost every chapter is something from my life. What happened to me, or it's one of the stories that my cop friends has told me that exhibits compassion. There are cops out there. I have a dear friend named Pete He was a sheriff's deputy. As an example, he got a call saying some guy wouldn't get out of his car. We're going to bust open the windows and get him out. And he said, hold on, I'm 2 minutes away. I'll be there. Pete rolls up and says, you guys stand over there. Let me go talk to him. He talked to him for about 15 seconds, went back to his car, came back with a bottle of cold water and said, look, you need some time to think about this. So I'm going to give you some water and you just think about it. See, Pete wasn't in a hurry. There wasn't any emergency. There's no need to act like this. So he had basically reasoned with the guy and he said, look, you're eventually going to have to get out of the car one way or the other. But if they bust open your windows, it's going to be $500. And plus, there's going to be a whole bunch of additional things tacked onto the citation. So just take 3 minutes and think about it, and we'll be over here waiting for you to decide. After about 3 minutes, the guy got out of the car, put his hands up on top of the car. He knew exactly what was going to happen because he had a warrant. He had a warrant. He knew he was going to get arrested. And all he really wanted was just a few minutes so he could call his wife or his girlfriend and say, I'm not coming home and this is what's up. But the cops didn't want to give him any time at all. Oh, you can't call anybody.
It's so true.
I got arrested one time out in front of Planned Parenthood. They wouldn't let me make a phone call. What's wrong with a phone call? Well, you might be calling your buddies down here to beat us up.
Oh my God.
Well, whatever.
Or
So
my
I
lawyer.
understand protocols, but you show compassion. You just allow the situation kind of the detectives to send it in its proper course. There wasn't any hurry here. The guy got out of the car. He was arrested. The car had to be impounded because it was an arrest warrant. But Pete disarmed the situation by just listening to the guy.
Yeah, you said 56 chapters. Are any of those personal stories?
29 is really personal. 29 is entitled The Thin Blue Line. The thin blue line represents how the police protect us, but it has a negative connotation too. It's when police protect each other.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's what happened to me in Washington, D.C. when I was stationed at Fort Belvoir. It's how I was involved in a near fatal traffic accident, and the person responsible for it was a police officer. And when I'm sitting in the back seat of the police, I'm reading and I said, look, I don't like to cause trouble, but this guy's obviously drunk and you didn't even put it in the report. Oh, yeah. I better put that in there. Well, I went home later and I'm reading the report more carefully. The guy who hit me was a police officer.
Wow.
So he was trying to cover for him because back then, I'm certain that driving under the influence by a police officer means automatic termination. So in my book, I put Officer Hanson in the passenger seat of a two patrol, one car. And he has this dialogue with the guy who didn't write the DUI in there.
Wow. You wish that there was someone on his shoulder that day telling the officer what to do.
Well, you understand in the dialogue, you understand where the officer's coming from. He is now going to be blackballed by a whole bunch of other cops because you ratted on one of our guys. He had no choice. When I brought it out, he had to write it in there. Had he not had to write it in, the guy just would have been cited for, traveling too fast or
Yeah, which is common for cops. Yeah.
It could happen even to cops. They make mistakes also. But driving under the influence, that was termination. And now it goes through the ranks that officer such and such ratted on such and such.
Wow. What do you feel is the most important lesson you've learned in your decades of teaching?
So The most important thing, a successful teacher exhibits one characteristic more than any other, that he cares. He shows that he cares. And that's why parents are the best teachers. I had some really great students, but when I went home, I didn't think about them all. I was thinking about my own kids. Parents are the best teachers, and government should get out of the way and help parents teach. They should not be in any way an obstacle to parents who want to homeschool. Homeschooling, I homeschooled all of my kids. Only my youngest one finished in a private school. The rest of them all were taught at home. I saved the taxpayers a lot of money, and I shouldn't think that the government should be trying to cause me trouble. My kids are all extremely well educated.
And you gave them all a very personal experience as well.
Yeah. So teachers need to care and show.
What role do you think education plays in defending liberty and civic responsibility?
Well, the founding fathers said, I should have all these on note cards, but one of them said, you can't have a republic without an educated and moral people. The republic. You can have a democracy. The founding fathers despised democracies. Saddens me. It saddens me when I hear people like Tucker Carlson, people who have pretty good understanding what's going on in the country, and they keep using the word democracy. We're never going to win the battle if we let them control the vocabulary. Democracy is nothing other than mob rule. As Franklin said, it's two wolves and a sheep discussing what's for dinner.
Wow.
A republic is two wolves and a sheep with a gun discussing what's for dinner. We have the gun, it's called the Constitution. We have to use the gun properly. I despise hearing people talking about things are so bad in this country, we're going to have to get our guns out. No, that's stupid. Tacticalcivics.com.
We should be able to defend ourselves with our words for sure.
Tacticalcivics.com. Write it down. Tacticalcivics.com is a place where you can go and learn what goes beyond the affidavit. What we can really do in one county. What I hope happens in Riverside County in the next 2 to 5 years is that everything Tactical Civics says we can do, we do. And then we have one county in the most goofy state in the country that's doing it right. And we do not win.
That's a good point.
We do not need to win any election. We don't need to win any election.
I love it. You're just trying to really hone the importance of local. I get where you're going with that, you know. Can you share a story about a student who changed your perspective on teaching?
Yes, Matthew Harrington. Wow, what a student. I've had hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of students. There's one that stands out the most. Matthew Harrington. I'll never forget. Okay, everybody go to work. And I would walk around helping students. And then after a little while, Matthew would get out and start walking around helping everybody. I never asked him to do anything. I said, Matthew, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm just helping people. Wow. What a kid. What a kid. That's the one I'd like to find again someday. But I've had students throughout my career that exhibit that attitude of wanting to help. People who find math easy and they just go around and want to help. That's the kid I'll never forget.
I love it. That's a good answer. What advice would you give someone just starting out in a career in education?
Oh, it's so difficult. It's because you have to do your homework and you have to find a school district that has a level head. And that may,
That's a good point.
well, rural areas. Don't go to big cities. Then they have a problem. Big cities might offer you a higher salary, but there's going to be a lot of trouble. Just look at what's the deal with this country where you look at a map of the last presidential election, and 80%, 90% of the country's red, and the 10, 15% of the country's blue. Blue is where the big cities are.
Mm-hmm.
And blue cities are full of problems that you don't have in small towns, small 100,000 less population. You just don't have those kind of problems. Until recently, now with the immigration, you're finding the problems getting into small communities as well. But my thing is, if at all, try to find a private school that's doing it well. We've got some excellent private schools in California. And if you get a job there, you will enjoy working there.
How do you stay motivated after so many years of public service and teaching?
Well, because I have hope. If I didn't know the affidavit process and doing interviews like this, I would be much more
distraught.
pessimistic. But when you know the truth sets you free, the truth gives you an optimistic view of the world, and you recognize that in the world that we live in right now, if something goes viral, it can change things almost overnight. They do not want this message to get out. They, being government officials who are making a wad of money controlling the lives of the great majority of the American people, they don't want this to go viral. I want it to get into other people talking about it. So it's no longer me out here in California. You need to deal with those people in Massachusetts. My gosh, you know what they're doing in Oklahoma and Washington and all over the place? It's spreading like wildfire. Paper revolution is taking place. And government officials are scurrying to find shelter. And some of them are just resigning because they realize, hey, the gig's over. They know how to control people.
What does liberty mean to you, and why is it worth defending?
Liberty is like oxygen. You can't live a productive life, in my view, without liberty. I wouldn't want to live in China. I'd like to visit China, but wouldn't want to live there. What's going on in El Salvador is interesting. I might want to go down there and consider staying for a while. But this is still the best country. Why would I really want to go anywhere else? Because I've learned how liberty works, how it can be fostered. I just need to educate more people so that our sphere of influence can increase drastically. We have from the Bible the story of Gideon's 300. We have from antiquity the story of the 300 Spartans. 300 is a number I'm looking for. I'm trying to get 300 people in this county of 3.5 million people to model what I'm doing, and let's take it even farther, and let's just clean house. Let's establish groups that, well, you guys are monitoring the water board, you guys are monitoring the school district, and you guys are monitoring that. And we make it clear to the people in this county that if you see something that's wrong, that's corrupt, you just feed it to us. We'll investigate it. We find out it's true. We'll rain paper down on the people that are responsible for this.
What do you think that says to like the founding fathers that you have to create a whole organization to oversee something like this? It's like a whole nother checks and balances on top of the checks and balances, you know?
It was always supposed to be that way. If you read the Constitution, you're not going to read much about elections. Elections are insignificant in the long run.
That's a good
We
point. And we
spend
put all
so
the we
much
put all
time.
the money, resources,
Yeah,
all the attention.
and now since COVID, we don't even know whether or not our elections are secure. We got people
Hmm.
mailing in ballots. My son doesn't live in the county anymore. They just sent a ballot to him.
Yeah, what's crazy is there's been books written about that. I think that go back to the 80s talking about election interference too.
Yeah. So I'm working for a congressman because I think if he won, he'd make a difference. I haven't worked for anybody other than Ron Paul since 2012, 12 years, because I don't see him making any difference. But I vote. I don't like it when people don't vote. I still vote, but I don't put much credibility in the outcome. And I don't think the founding fathers did either.
How has your perspective on government accountability evolved over the years?
Well, right now, I just said it. I used to put a lot of effort into elections. Boy, I tell you, back in 1972, I moved from South Dakota to California. I worked 3 months after I got out of the military, 3 months out here working for George McGovern
Oh, wow.
because George McGovern was get me out of Vietnam. I didn't look at anything else. He was a homegrown boy, South Dakota, and that makes my heart warm. And then on top of it, he's against the war. So I came out here and that's all I did for 3 months. Work, work, work for McGovern. And of course, he got destroyed. He only won one state. He couldn't even win his home state. I mean, that was a wrench to me. South Dakota even voted against their own guy. So I reckon, boy, that was like a wake-up call. It's got to be something other than elections. This was heartrending because almost every time I would support somebody, got excited about somebody, they lost. I have never won. I can't think back. I've never won an election. Well, you might say I won with Trump in 2016, yeah.
16,
But
16.
I didn't work for Trump. Only guy I ever worked for was Ron Paul. And it, I'm glad you brought this up because I want to say this. What was the number one caveat Washington left us in the farewell address? What was the thing he said is the biggest obstacle to freedom and liberty?
Oh, wait. No. Was it military industrial or am I making that up?
Yeah, it's not that. It's partisan politics.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
He said partisan politics will destroy the country. And wow, fast forward to 2024. You have hardly
Split.
anybody that crosses over. The Democrats and Republicans, and they don't cross over. And you'll meet people right now. When I grew up, if you were a Democrat, so what? Wasn't that big a deal? Democrats were pro-American. Democrats were reasonable people. I'm not saying there still aren't some Democrats that are reasonable, but boy, I tell you, my oldest son is hardcore to the left, and it's like this big wall has gone up between them. And I try the best I can to build bridges to people. And when I meet Democrats, I'm campaigning for this guy, I have pretty good conversations with them because I'm just trying to find points of commonality. Like, hey, all of us ought to be concerned about water. We need more water out here. Let's desalt this. the ocean and get water into the San Joaquin Valley so we stop losing our farmland. We don't have to be dependent upon rainfall.
You know, we didn't really talk about like how art might have played a role in all of this, but was there any artist that might have had an influence on you or your perspective? It could be
Well,
any medium of art.
that would be music only. No, I
Because
don't
there's
think
never
so.
really been,
There's some
hasn't really been revolutionaries in that aspect, you know?
right. This new song, Fight, I listen to that, but it doesn't really capture me. I like that song, I'm Proud to Be an American. I have problems with that song because at least I know I'm free. You're not free. You think you're free.
And it says at least. I love it.
But I love America. God Bless America is a great song. Land that I love. And I have a responsibility. I'm often reminded when I think about how few are really engaged that Washington with his men were at Valley Forge in 1777. It's freezing. They're losing some of their fingers and toes. Some are actually dying. The British are 20 miles away in Philadelphia, hunkered down in the people's homes. They quartered their soldiers in the people's homes. And American farmers were selling crops to the British. There's always going to be a remnant. There'll never be a majority. There'll always be a small group of people, as Samuel Adams said, who are focused and won't quit. And I'm 75. I might have 15 good years left. I'm not quitting. And all these people who are retired, stop playing golf and get your butt in gear to save the country.
We got a few more questions here. What's a lesson from your military experience that you still apply to your daily life?
Hard work, discipline. Here's a good one. I'm a church person. I go to church. I tell the pastor, I'm never going to volunteer for anything. You know, I was in the military. I never volunteered for anything. They told me what to do. And that's your job. Your job as an agent of Jesus Christ is to tell me what to do. And I'll tell you if I can't do it. If I can't do that, I've got a wife right now that I have to take care of. I can't do that. But otherwise, I do it. I'm tired of pastors who cherry coat everything, make sense. Oh, do you feel comfortable enough here? No. When people say I go to this church because I feel comfortable there, I'm kind of like, wow. Yeah, the apostles were really comfortable when they were being martyred. And these guys are being tortured. How many times did Paul get stoned? He
You hate
wasn't
that word,
comfortable,
huh?
but he was doing what he knew was the right thing to do. That is such an important thing to do. Do what you know is the right thing to do. Davy Crockett said, do the right thing, don't sweat the consequences. And he went to the Alamo.
Damn. Yo, that hits hard because I'm near there. You know, I'm in Texas. I like it. What advice would you give to people who feel powerless against the system?
Well, gosh, learn how the system works. Go to remedyatlaw.us. That's my website, remedyatlaw.us. And you'll see a couple of short videos that explain what we're trying to do. And recognize this is not rocket science. This is pretty easy stuff. And I'm available and other people are available. There's a group of us that are going across the country. We want to get groups established in counties throughout the country. That's what Tactical Civics is all about, county by county. And just get involved and learn. We got some great books that you can read and learn what made America great. Find out something called the people's grand jury. That's in tactical civics. That's where we set up our own grand juries by county ordinances. The people pass the ordinance giving credibility and authority to a group of people who will act as the county grand jury, and we have subpoena powers, and we call the sheriff down and sit in that chair over there. We've got some questions for you. Remember, everything that you say is subject to perjury. What?
Wow.
This was 1840. This is 1880. This is 2010. We still had people's grand juries. Now we have government-run grand juries when government does not inspect itself very well.
Where would that fit into the judge of the county? Is the people's grand jury above that, telling him what to do? Or them? Her?
Well, the grand jury would investigate an issue. If they find evidence of criminal culpability, they would then send forth a presentation. The presentment is what it's called. And it would go to the DA, and the DA would be forced to take the matter into severe consideration, serious consideration. If he does not act on it, then of course the grand jury can take action against the DA.
Wow.
And this is the way America operated. Now,
this is all new to me.
Wow. What happens is every time you have a war, you come out after the war with less liberty. We had the Civil War. America was never the same after the Civil War. Then we had World War I. What did we get during World War I? During that period of World War I, we got an income tax. We got the Federal Reserve System. All of that came out during that era. And then, of course, we had World War II. And now everybody's paying income tax. Income tax was originally nothing more than an excise tax. If you're selling certain things, you have to pay an excise tax called an income tax. Now everybody's paying income tax. Because we came out of that war and everybody was used to paying a patriot war tax. Well, we just called it income tax. Precedence is dangerous. Once it's established, it's difficult to deal with it. Most Americans would say, well, I have to pay the income tax. I have to pay the income. Well, yeah, but remember, it's voluntary compliance, and you're voluntarily doing it. Now,
how do you feel? No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mind you, there's a process you have to deal with. For instance, when I'm traveling in my car, I know I might have a situation where I'm dealing with the police chief, the deputy sheriff of the highway patrol. So what I did is I sent an affidavit to all three of them in advance. So if I get stopped, you're a police department. Okay, you get proof of insurance. You get my driver's license, and here's the affidavit to your boss. My boss, yeah. You need to make sure you read this one because this is to your boss. And if he reads it and he realizes, my God, if I do anything of this, I better check on this before I give this guy a ticket. I'm telling him in advance. Same with the income tax. If you're going to deal anything with the income tax or any of the problems where the government's telling you have to do something, there's a proper notification method that you want to follow. Because once you notify them and you tell them they have 30 days in order to rebut, and they can't rebut, then they recognize, if they take action against you, you could take action against them because you notified them. Notification is the first step in due process. You must notify your adversary. The court wants the adversary to have an opportunity to remedy it so you don't have to go to court.
True. Yeah. How do you feel about the way we treat our actual veterans, considering your past and history?
Well, our biggest problem is we've got so many veterans. They're veterans of foreign war. people would say, well, we got to do something about all these guns. Switzerland's got per capita almost as many guns as we do. How come they don't have all the violence that we have, even on a per capita basis? In Switzerland, they have shooting contests where people will be walking downtown, they all have rifles. They'll go to a restaurant, they'll hang their rifle up over there. My friend, many years ago, I said, we're going to Switzerland for a vacation. I want you to check on their military. He came back and he said, look, one of the places I stayed, I put my coat up in the closet and there was a bazooka in there. A bazooka, yeah. I said that his job in the military, in the militia, is he's a bazooka man. In militia, every county, every canton, every township has a militia. And they train periodically. Some guy's job would be to go to such and such a place and blow up the bridge. They're all trained. In Switzerland, you have to be in the militia. Unless you have some kind of religious objection, you have to be in the militia. They have all these guns and they're not shooting each other. The difference is Switzerland has always figured out a way to stay out of war. We have always figured out a way to be in war. Other than the 4 years under Trump, he was supposed to start all kinds of wars. He didn't start any. We're always at war. Bush started wars. Clinton had a war. We have wars, constant wars. So who's fighting the war? Our men. They come home, and our women, and they come home, and they become police officers. And they were tragically affected by war. I don't care how noble the conflict. When you see people dying, it's not a good situation. When you see people dying because of gunshot wounds or mortar rounds or whatever, it changes the human psyche. To me, that's the main reason why we have so much killing in the United States, is that we've been involved in wars and our people come home and they're not the same.
Wow. What do you think community plays in defending individual rights? What role specifically?
Our job is to become educated. My job is to educate people. I've been an educator all my life. Now I'm educated. 2 months ago, I had not done one interview. Now I'm close to 20.
Wow.
And some of these.
Also, your other thought on Switzerland, why do you think that they're able to operate without such violence? We didn't really touch on that.
Well, they have within their constitution statements of neutrality. They cannot go to war. All they can do is defend their border. And the Germans twice decided, we're not going to go in there. It's going to be too messy. So the whole attitude is conveyed through the population, beginning in grade school. We're neutral. We don't get involved in other people's trouble. The United States is in everybody's trouble.
I guess what I'm really trying to get at, though, is the civil attitude of not using them against each other, right? Is it maybe because their I don't want to say way of life, but their conditions per capita, maybe they have a better rate living standard than Americans?
I think there's a less diversity in income. More people are stacked in the middle. There's not that much poverty in Switzerland. They don't have the racial problems that we have. Black people, I tell black people, you really need to understand the affidavit process more than anybody else. If you're a victim of profiling, you need to know how to handle that. So you're not getting more tickets because you're black driving in a white neighborhood. you'll feel empowered. That, okay, you do what I do. They stop you because you're black driving in a white neighborhood. They're going to want to see proof of insurance, driver's license, and then give them the affidavit to his boss and see how their attitude changes. They're not going to treat you the way they're going to treat the next black guy. And I'm just saying if there happens to be a racist cop, and there's a few of them
Yeah.
out there. When the people know the law and follow the law, and preferably the higher law of God, but certainly the constitutional, then everybody's going to be better off. When we know what is right and what is wrong, and we live principled lifestyle in favor of truth. Americans got to stop being so self-centered. They have to come out and start doing more. But thank God, it doesn't have to be the majority. It would be great if it was the majority. But it's got to start with a small group of people who set an example of how to properly live.
How do you feel about, the fact that we use the guise of liberty to kind of infiltrate everywhere we go,
Well,
We'll liberate them.
yeah, that's a Marxist terminology. We're going to liberate you. You're a victim, and we're going to liberate you. And
we know what you need.
they'll turn white people against black people. They'll turn black people against Hispanic. They'll turn Democrats against Republicans. There'll be all this division that what we have to do is deal with those people who are oppressing you.
Oh, wow.
And of course, in the end, the Marxists will be oppressing everybody.
It's funny because my age, I wasn't that familiar with Karl Marx growing up, but as I get older, I am interested in like why is he so hated amongst the meme community, right? There's so many memes of Karl Marx, like making jokes of his predictions coming true and why they don't like him. And do you think it's really just because of, the foresight of what he saw during his time? Or are we just living it out?
We're living it out.
Oh my God.
Orwell's 1984.
Oh no.
My God.
Yeah.
They
It's an
saw it.
instruction manual.
Yeah. But see, it's the outgrowth of trying to have a culture that's not centered on God and God's law. That's the biggest thing. John Dewey. Do you know John Dewey?
Mm-mm.
John Dewey was the premier secular humanist educator of the 20th century. John Dewey. John Dewey said one thing that I totally agree with. He said, if we can take anything to be religious, we can take education as such. Yeah. Now imagine I have this thought. If you don't teach something, you still teach something. By that I mean, if you don't teach anything about God, you're teaching that God is irrelevant. I can have a school where we say the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. We might mention God in the allegiance prayer or statement, but we never talk about God the rest of the day. You can expect to be successful in life. You can make $1 million. You can do all this stuff. You don't need to talk about God at all. Well, Dewey and Horace Mann and others had decided early on that they wanted to use public education following a Prussian model. They wanted to bring public education. First, they use it to get the Protestants to go against the Catholics. We'll start some Protestant private public schools, Protestant public schools, and we'll get the Catholics in there and we'll Protestantize them. This is all brought out in the book, is Public Education Necessary by Samuel Blumenfeld. And Samuel points out that that was the method. Oh, the Catholics are coming. The Catholics are coming. We got to have public schools, and we'll try to like that. Well, the Catholics were too smart for that. They started their own school.
Wow.
But Horace Mann, John Dewey, these guys had a long-range plan. It wasn't going to be taken over in one generation, probably take 10 generations. But eventually, God would be completely removed from the school system. And men would be just searching out their own truth.
Interesting. What I'm reading is that Dewey believed in learning by doing, emphasized that education should be centered around the needs and experiences of the student rather than traditional rote memorization. He argued that schools should prepare students by active participation in a democratic society by encouraging critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration. Profound influence on modern education, advocating for experimental learning and the idea that education is a continuous process of growth. Interesting. His works include Democracy in Education and Experience in Education.
Well, there's two words right there. He's talking about democracy. And he's talking about doing away with rote memory. I like the idea of critical thinking. That's a good idea. But look where we got now. I'm a math teacher. So when Common Core came in, I looked at it very suspiciously. And I recognized, my God, this is perfect. This curriculum will build a wall between parents and children. What do you think goes through your mind of a third grader or fourth grader who comes home with a math assignment that the parents don't know how to do? My father and mother don't even know how to do fourth grade math.
Yeah.
Oh, but my teacher knows how to do fourth grade math. My teacher is smarter than my parents. That's all by design.
Wow.
I walked into a school board meeting and some guy's giving a presentation on core math, doing something like 57 times 42. And I'm a math person. I'm trying to figure out what he's talking about. And when he gets done, all five of those people up there on the dais are like, wow, that was pretty interesting. Yeah, but nobody knows. None of you guys come down here and do the same thing for 32 times 48. You all know how to do it the old way. That's the way they're going to all do it later, but we've got to learn two other ways of doing it. Well, when we're learning two other ways to do it, we're not doing other things. We're taking too much time on 32 times 55. We need to move on beyond that quicker.
Wow. That's a mic drop, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a bombshell right there. I don't think most people know that. Even though that we probably experience it, it's not a conscious thing we're aware of, you know?
Well, it's even worse out here because they'll have Johnny doing his math in Spanish.
Oh my gosh.
So you're coming
It's
home.
a joke. It's a joke.
I'm a math teacher. I know math, but I don't know Spanish.
Yeah, they're making it difficult on
I've got
purpose.
to get some apparatus out to kind of figure out what did he say.
Oh my gosh. Extra steps.
Yeah. So it's no wonder that our students are doing very poorly. 40 years ago, American students were near the top. Now we're near the bottom.
I agree. And other countries are probably laughing as they're passing us. Are there any particular historical events that have shaped your views on government and liberty?
Oh my, yes, 9/11.
Oh, wow. Didn't think about that one.
Joseph, how many buildings fell down that day?
At least 3, but the Pentagon could be 4.
Yeah, well, most people don't know about the third one. They don't know about 7.
They don't know your Army Corps of Engineers training and what demolitions look like.
Yeah, that's another thing too. We blow things up, they collapse the same way those things collapse, right in their shadow. That was the biggest one. So in my book, Officer Hanson, that's in my book.
Oh, wow.
That somebody brings that to its attention and he starts doubting the media. So all these things that took place in my life, they find their way into the book. It took me 7 years to write the book. That's because sometimes I would wait 6 months between chapters. I didn't have anything more to say. I would say that my experience in life and my love for the truth led me to write the book the way it was written. And now I'm at a place where I'm just trying to get it published. I want a professional writer to rewrite with me. I want a professional female writer to write with me because I have a feminine hero in there as well, and I want her to become more female. I'm a
Yeah.
guy.
I got you. The perspective,
Yeah.
personality.
Well,
And when we talked about how there's like a purposeful divide between teachers and, well, not teachers, but parents and students, do you feel like that's ever been the case, maybe intentionally dividing law enforcement with civilians? Has there ever been that aspect of us versus them that you've noticed?
well, I grew up in a city of 80,000 people, and we had high respect for police officers. We had a police officer who was in our school. I mean, it wasn't for safety. We didn't have him. He just came over and we wanted to know. He talked to us, and I think you can still do that. In my book, that's what one of the things that I try to convey is that Officer Hanson is involved in community work. He works out at the gym. He teaches martial arts at the gym. His wife teaches martial arts at the gym. And it's the cruddy part of town that he goes to. And he begins to have an influence, especially his wife begins to have a real influence on the people and becomes one of the less criminal infested parts of the city. But cops need to want to do that. If you've been hardened by war, it makes it more difficult to become sensitive to people's needs. The best thing that happened to us is just stop having wars. It's going to be a
I
long
do
process.
I do empathize too on the other side because there are a lot of stigmas that haven't really made it better, for the population to want to trust police or law enforcement. So it's both ways in a sense.
Cops have a tough job, but we the people, that's one of the things we have to do. I went to my sheriff, not the present one, but the one before, and I told him about what's going on in Detroit, and I said, look, we'll pay for one of your officers to spend a week in Detroit and just learn what they're doing over there. And even though we were willing to pay for it, he didn't want to do it. But I think as we grow our group, we'll have more influence in many different ways. We'll get to the NAACP. We'll go to places where white people don't normally go. And we'll build relationships with people. And we'll make our county better. And that's the goal. You can't change the country if you can't change the state. You can't change the state if you can't change your county and city. And we got
Start
a
where you're at.
lot of stuff going for us in this county. We've got some really, really good people.
I think starting local is the big takeaway from this episode. Two more questions here. Looking back at your career, what are you most proud of and why?
that I would say the Alpha Center for women. Even though I haven't been involved in it for many, many years, it's still there. No longer Alpha Center for Women, it's just the Alpha Center. And they deal with men and women, and they teach all kinds of things about positive parenting. We took nothing and we made something. They took something and made it really big. It is very, very well known in Fort Collins, Colorado. And it's right across the street from Colorado State University. And probably hundreds, if not thousands, of young women that passed through there over these 40 years. And they've all been touched by the love of God and the compassion of people who are willing to listen.
And, that was just an idea that you had. Did you have any expectations?
Well, I knew what they were doing in Sioux Falls, and I wanted to model them. I saw how effective they were, and they got about a 5-year head start on. So I knew where we wanted to go. We used that very unusual method of marketing, and I was pleasantly surprised. Well, I remember the first phone call that I took when my wife was not home. And I just let it ring. I didn't want to answer the phone. So I listened to the voicemail, and she said, "I need help. I need help. Please call. Please call." So I hung up and walked away. And the phone rang again, and I let it go. And it was the same woman. And now she was crying. "Please, please." And I got back on the phone, and I called and I said, "Listen, we're going to have some women to your house. So wherever you are in the next hour, just hang up." And we did. I had my wife and another woman over there. And that's why we knew we were doing the right thing, because of that phone call.
Damn. So my last question, I usually have guests end with, what does it mean to you to be more than rich? But you can take your time on that one. We didn't really get too much into finances or anything like that. Just however you want to answer that one.
Wise man said, I already mentioned it, you can't take anything to heaven but your friends and your family. When I die, I know it won't be like some rich guy. Hardly anybody showed up for the funeral. There'll be a lot of people at my funeral because I cared about the world that I lived in. I would also like to add here at this point that this show is called More Than Riches.
More than rich,
More
yeah.
Than Rich. So anybody who's interested in learning more about what I do, they can go to affidavitsecrets.com/riches. And you can get on the mailing list. So what's happening right now is that one chapter from my book, his executive summary, is sent out every other day. So you won't know what's going on with my book. I also have a 50% discount offer to anybody who's watched this for the course that I put together on the power of paper. Generally speaking, you can find my contact information, and when this is released, there'll be some contact information. You can get in touch with me, and I can talk to you and help you. I'm not being overloaded with phone calls at this time. But it's possible for you to get in touch with me directly, and I'll be able to help you in a situation. I've tried to help some people already. Usually I have to refer them to somebody else, but I'm here to listen.
Lastly, I mean, maybe if anyone needs any resources, any books that you recommend, and then you can talk about your own resources and books, like how to find you, if contact you.
Well, if you go to remedyatlaw.us, you can contact me through there. My other contact information is at Kirk@affidavitsecrets.com. Those are two ways that you can get in touch with me.
Got it.
Thank you
Awesome, Kirk.
so much, Joseph, for this opportunity. I never had anybody have me on for 2.5 hours.
I mean, I learned a lot, and there's probably still I can learn. So maybe we'll do this again in the future. I hope.
Oh, I hope by the next time this year I'm a lot smarter than I am now.
Of course, that's the keep growing and keep learning mindset.
Yeah.
Thanks for your contributions to society too, by the way, because I know it means a lot to you, and I definitely take a note myself of how I can apply that to my own nonprofit.
Okay.
And if also, last thoughts, if there is anything that I can help, like in terms of advocacy, make a white paper or anything, I'd be glad to help you research and, advocate more.
I'm going to be in touch with you. We'll talk more.
Awesome.
All right?
Awesome, Kirk.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.